Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Max Spoilers from MinnMax. MinnMax is a place about games, friends, getting better. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Hansen, joined by Janet Garcia.
Hello.
And the real webhead himself, Jacob Geller.
Thwip.
That's right, and Kyle Hilliard.
A pithy comment.
Yeah,
in the middle
baby.
of combat.
This is a big spoilercast discussion for Marvel's Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac. So if you have not finished that game, get the heck out of here. And Janet, we were talking earlier this week at MinnMax about like the best way to structure this. How about we have our main story spoilers, then there'll be a timestamp which you can see in the description where we can start like side quest spoilers. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Did we all do all the side quests?
I haven't done it quite yet, but I listened to other spoiler casts, and so some stuff was spoiled for me, so we can unpack all that stuff.
Yeah, there's one that like the conclusion, I was like, I don't know who this character is supposed to be or what this is, and I haven't seen much people talk about it. But
okay, all right, we can get to that. There's going to be a timestamp below for all that fun stuff. But thank you so much for being here, everybody. We're going to be unpacking this game in a big bad way, in such a big and bad way that you might find it more convenient to listen to this as a podcast instead of some stupid YouTube video. Oh, you have to see our faces. Oh, we're checking our phones, being distracted. Oh, we're blinking.
I'm looking at my trophies. I'm trying to find my trophies, Ben.
The point is you can
unlock...
unlock...
There's notes on those phones, right? Like, I feel like that shouldn't have to be said, and yet...
Here we are. But anyways, you can unlock the podcast version of this discussion by supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Of course, go there, find the tier that's right for you. But at the $5 tier, you can unlock the podcast version of this and the podcast version of the deepest dive on Alan Wake 2, which is our huge multi-part game club discussion happening right now. It is the best, most thorough discussion about Alan Wake 2 on the internet, so you can check that out. And a ton of other stuff is in that bonus podcast feed. So thank you for unlocking it. I know we say that stuff all the time. But if you genuinely have any questions about how that process works, let us know in the comments. It's really a quick copy and paste job, and then it's just a beautiful feed right in your favorite podcast app. It's not through the Patreon app or anything exclusive and dopey like that. Also, last bit of plugging before we get into plugging the story beats of this game is, if you're watching this, you probably like Spider-Man. And if you like Spider-Man, you probably like PlayStations. And if you're watching this, you probably like PlayStation 5 Spider-Man console variants. So here's the thing. If you tune into our big charity stream, our marathon charity stream happening Saturday, December 2nd, at over here on MinnMax's YouTube channel, we're going to be doing a ton of charity auctions, like at least 2 charity auctions every single hour, and all of the money is going to Connections to Independence, which is helping foster kids in Minneapolis. But specifically, one of the charity auctions, and it's up on the charity site and also on our Patreon site right now if you want to get a full schedule of all this stuff, but one of our charity auctions is the Spider-Man 2 PS5. The full Spider-Man 2 PS5 console and controller. So if you want to donate to charity, and then as a prize, we'll ship you out a Spider-Man PS5, you can tune into that big marathon stream happening Saturday, December 2nd for a good cause. It's going to be a lot of fun. Folks rotating through the MinnMax studio, all that fun stuff. Spider-Man 2, Jacob, we're here. Let's talk about this freaking thing.
Yeah, I platinumed it.
Ooh, nice. All right. And then Janet, also you've been going hot and heavy on this thing?
Yeah, I platinumed it as well.
Jeez, love it. I haven't quite gotten that far, Kyle. We're probably about the same camp of like doing a lot of the side missions, but not 100%ing things yet.
I 100%ed, but I didn't get the platinum because there's a couple platinums that are like, do this stealth attack a certain number of times. Then I was at the end of the game. I was like, well, I didn't do that enough. So
yeah,
moving on with my life.
And moving on. Yeah, we talked about it on the MinnMax Show podcast a couple times. We're talking about this game, but I freaking love this game. It just felt like the type of game that just hit me in the right time of my life. It was exactly what I was craving. I was craving a good story. Thank you. We got it. No jokes missed. But I was just delighted by how relatively in the dark I was. And now in retrospect, spoilers. In retrospect, it's like, okay, the game is structured like Kraven, then Symbiote, then Venom. You kind of get the big beats. You could have guessed it from the marketing. But I gotta say, like, as I was playing through this game, I was more compelled by the story in this game than anything since Ragnarok. Now, Alan Wake 2 is obviously coming later, and that's an interesting distinction, yada, yada, yada. But like, I was so eager to see where the story was going. I was so excited every step of the way. Once I realized, like, okay, it's Venom through the ending, and Venom's going to be, spoilers, Harry. It's like, okay, that's maybe the least interesting option based on the pre-marketing, but conceptually I still think it's a really cool idea. So it dipped a little bit towards the second half of the game, but overall, I just freaking love this game. I thought it was incredible, and it made me reevaluate the last couple Spider-Man games. Like, God, did I not appreciate those enough? Because everything about this game just hit me like a ton of bricks. But Janet, I mean, big picture, what'd you think of Spider-Man 2?
I loved it. I mean, I think it operates, it's tough to imagine a game or think of a game that does what Spider-Man 2 does as well as it does it. I think we've had a lot of the sort of checklisty, icon-filled map, open world. And again, this is not our first Spider-Man game in the modern era. So I feel like we sort of went in knowing sort of what to expect, I think, in terms of structure. It's like, okay, this is going to be a great game because it's still fun to swing around. It's still fun to be Spider-Man. But what's going to be different? How are they going to elevate it? Well, I think they still have a little bit of room for growth. Like, I wouldn't say this is like a masterpiece video game. It is very, very good. And I was honestly impressed by how much I enjoyed the small tweaks and how much I felt like the small tweaks did make a significant impact. Things like the wingsuit, things like sort of the simplicity of the button mapping for the gadgets, even though, again, you can argue that's less interesting than before. And I think the story had a lot of heart. I don't think I was as intrigued by the story as it sounds like you were, but I still enjoyed the ride of it. And I think the side content was frankly my favorite part of the game narratively.
Oh, interesting.
It is tough when it's such an established IP where it's like, I know a lot about Spider-Man just from existing within the games and Marvel. So like, I wasn't as delighted by some of the things that would have surprised me if I somehow could have wiped my mind before playing the game.
Right, but there's enough tweaks on the standard formulas here to still pack in surprises and stuff. But like, I think it was the first half of the game just really sucked me in, just with that premise of like, it's a cool idea to have Kraven, this villain out there, hunting down all of the other villains from the game. So he's trying to kill the villains while the two Spider-Men are out there trying to save all the villains. It's like, that's just like a weird dynamic for the structure of the story that stood out. But Gooseberry, getting ready to it on Twitch, there's, hey, favorite moment in the game. Jacob, what do you think is your favorite moment in the game? Let's jump in the deep end, man.
Oh, gosh. I mean, playable Venom is hard to beat.
Yeah.
But I do think my favorite moment is actually black-suited Peter chasing Lizard through New York and just destroying the entire city. You know, just like the kind of the point being like the amount of infrastructure damage that is happening during that chase was, you know, for like what this game does well, which is those big set piecey, like lots of things happening at the same time moments. I think that was my favorite. And it was also like we'll talk about like the symbiote suit Peter is kind of a mixed bag, but like that was my favorite character moment of him. And I thought that was kind of the most interesting of like, he's still doing the hero thing. He just doesn't care as much about anything else. And like, that's really interesting.
Right. And then eventually I feel like by the end of that fight is when he's descending even darker into symbiote stuff. By the time
where he's just like, I'm going to kill Lizard. You know?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting just to have Lizard growing bigger and bigger throughout the whole thing. I felt like I wanted more exposition with Lizard, like Dr. Connors throughout it. I feel like that was an overwhelming sense as I was going through this game of like, I just want a sequence where I can sit down with like Doc Connors and just be like, all right, this symbiote, how exactly does it work? Let's work through the details of like, what is it doing? Just bursting through the clothes? Like, I don't know if I missed like some dialogue options, but I wanted more just one-on-one time with him because he seemed like he knew a lot and they could only pack so much into the main story and keep things moving, you know? Kyle?
Favorite moment? Yeah, favorite moment. Because there's so many big set piece moments, and then the playable Venom was a nice surprise. But I will say, and this is totally on me, that I was like, oh, this is going to be like Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm going to run around the city as Venom. And then when it's clear that that's not what's going to happen,
right,
I was like a little disappointed. But that's something that I did to myself. You know, it's like, I want to run around the whole city as Venom. They're like, no, keep you here, but it'll still be fun. And I was like, oh, okay. But like, I was thinking about it. I mean, honestly, maybe it almost feels like the lame answer, but the intro to that game is still maybe the height for me of just like, you know, it felt like the beginning, but it felt like playing the beginning of God of War 2 for the first time or something, where you're fighting this giant colossus, and like we've talked about it before, when Miles gets thrown across the city and slingshots back, and like at the time I had just played the beginning of Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is a very slow burn and moves very slowly, and like to go from that to like Insomniac being like, this cost $1 billion was like, wow, this is just incredible. And then honestly, another moment I liked, which was kind of in that tier of like, God, they're really like spending a lot of money on this game and throwing weird things into it. It's a weird one, but Peter riding a bicycle. I was like, really? They took the time to like come up with the physics and like gameplay mechanics for Peter to ride a bicycle. It was just that it surprised me. I was like, I can't believe they're doing this.
Yeah, it takes it back to like San Andreas or something. It's like, oh yeah, just biking around in a game is something I haven't done that much.
Even in San Andreas, it makes sense. It's like, oh, another vehicle to throw into the mix. It's like Spider-Man is not a character I associate with riding a bicycle.
And you were like, is this a Cage the Elephant song playing while I ride my bicycle?
Or no, it wasn't the Shins. It was
they did play the Shins later.
While they're playing basketball.
Right. It's just there's a lot of those moments where it was just like, God, they're really putting a lot of resources into this thing. They're willing to spend a lot of money on it, which is like not really a critical opinion one way or the other, as much as I'm just sort of impressed.
Yeah,
I think that is a lot of like I think I am impressed by this game as much or more than I actually like it, because I think, Kyle, we agreed on the pod that it's like story-wise, I think maybe third out of the 3 Spider-Man games, but like I had a great time the whole time, and more than anything, I am impressed that they kind of like pulled off this thing.
Yeah, one of those like story is still more interesting and engaging than most games, especially on that tier. But like, yeah, if you look at the other 3, like it's weak for me. I didn't really like the black suit stuff. I don't really like Venom as a villain. I just don't like Venom. The whole thing with Spider-Man to me has always been like, he has these personal relationships with his enemies. And he has that with Harry, obviously, but he doesn't have that with Venom. Venom just is a creature from space, And so I'm always kind of like underwhelmed by that a little bit. But
yeah, like that transition, like I think it's a really interesting and smart idea to like make it more of an emotional punch by, having the symbiote infect Harry, so he has more of a connection to Venom, but still is like, you got to do the classic Venom stuff. But once he went like full Venom, I did a lot of like squinting, like, is there any bit of Harry still in here? Like, what was Harry also licking his teeth constantly? Like, is there some like connection? Like, I was still confused. Like, why is he so huge now? Where I think I just got too off my head about the idea of like, okay, I bet since Eddie Brock isn't in this, I bet that Kraven's going to become Venom, because that's going to explain why he's so big. Yada yada. It's like, no. It's just, you're going to have Harry turn into Venom, and it's not going to be the most connected thing.
And I do think that the scale of this game, which makes it so fun and impressive to play the whole time, does kind of like, it makes it harder for it to land those very personal moments, because like obviously Miles' story and Miles Morales is like totally about kind of like his friends from school and growing up and changing.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed in the first Spider-Man game and the final boss, which we're spoiling Spider-Man 1, I guess, as well, but like the moment where Ock rips off his mask or whatever, or just reveals that he knew Spider-Man was Peter the whole time, and Peter says, you knew, and he is like so betrayed, and it's like this really interesting, unexpected character beat where I was like, I feel like I understand the relationship between these two characters, and then they kind of threw in a new wrinkle, and I was kind of looking for that more in this game, and felt like I didn't quite find it in the same way that, like, I really got hit with it in Spider-Man 1.
So just some deeper layer of the dynamics here compared to just, oh, they're best friends, and then things fall apart.
It's just like, I think the symbiote stuff where it's like, oh, when they've got the symbiote, they're gonna say some mean stuff about like their conflicted feelings and their relationships, and I was kind of waiting for one of those to like surprise me or hit more deeply. And it didn't quite, but I'm totally open to hearing that it did for other people.
That was some of my favorite stuff, is when they're speaking the truth a little bit more or have some deep down feelings that are coming through because of the symbiote. Like, I think that's a really interesting dynamic that comes through the entire game. Like, when you're fighting Harry/Venom at the end and he's just screaming about being jealous of Peter's friendship with Miles. Like, oh, there's some interesting, somewhat deeper stuff. Or, I feel like in the Peter and Miles fight, there's some deeper truths about their relationship and jealousies and rivalries and stuff that comes through there. And then conceptually, one of my favorite moments in the game is like the Scream fight outside of Emme's house. But at the same time, it's like, I wasn't very familiar with Scream as a character.
Oh, wait, yeah. When you said Scream fight, I was like, "What? What are you talking about? Is that
the Screaming fight?
Mary
That's
Jane?
MJ.
The MJ, yeah. So Scream apparently, as far as I understand it, and correct me where we're wrong, Spider Nuts, but the idea is Scream is another character, but in this world, then it's like Mary Jane turns into Scream with the symbiote. But like, visually, a bit of a nightmare. It just feels like very 90s comic book stuff. Like, it's not the most compelling thing. But
my partner was sitting next to me while that happened and was just screaming, like, why did they make her hot? Why are they trying to make her hot?
But I do think like that was the most interesting layer of that speaking truth when inhabited by the symbiote, where she was always just like, for once, it's not about you, Peter. It's about me. It's not about this stupid house, and it's actually not about your job and my job. Like, just the layer of her pushing that, like, finally this story is about me. I'm sick of just everything revolving around you, Spider-Man/Peter Parker. Like, I thought that was a really cool idea, and it went on for so long. Janet, I hope you'll get this reference. It was really basically the fight scene from Before Midnight. Like, it was just like stretched out for such an extended period of time. I really loved it.
That fight scene's so much better, though.
Of course it's better.
Here's my thing, like with the macro. I think this is the best Spider-Man game, but I still think the first one has the best Spider-Man story. The difference becomes stark in how I ended up feeling, sort of walking away from it, where a lot of my narrative takes here are like, well, it didn't give me anything that I didn't already have for the most part. Minus the Scream thing, because I just didn't know about it.
Sure.
But I think back to that first game, and I knew all of that lore generally. And obviously they, with comic stuff, it's always like your take on a certain thing. So some things might subvert expectations. Other things may be echoing other pieces of media that have, told similar stories. But I feel like the nuances in the writing that Jacob alluded to, it hits so much harder. Like, it's like, oh yeah, like Peter loses his aunt. We've seen that like a million times, in his family. But when it happened in the first game, I really felt something, despite having, knowing it's going to happen. Like, just because a loss is going to happen, it should still hit you. And I think a lot of the symbiote conflict, like the beefs, it just felt very like fake. Like, it feels like if they did that with us in this podcast, it would just be like made up rant, like, oh, well, you're the host. Now I want to be the host. It's like, I don't know. Like, who?
That's
like,
how you
I don't
feel
it. It doesn't feel real. It feels so like I could have written on a napkin the things they would have said to people, and it became true. And it didn't feel special in any way. So that was kind of my beef with those.
I agree. I didn't feel like the things that Peter was saying to Miles, I was like, I really just don't believe that Peter feels that way.
Yeah.
That it just seemed, I totally agree with you. But I feel like we should talk more about how we also enjoyed the game, because Ben, I'm sure you're very upset right now.
No, yeah,
I'm
like with all
fuming.
that, I think I said it on the podcast too. With all that being said about sort of qualms with the narrative, which are qualms ultimately, they're not like big knocks against the game or anything. It's like you press triangle and you have web wings, and it's like I can't even go back to Miles or Spider-Man at this point. Like for the people who have, I've heard apparently it's like there's like little things that you don't realize where it's like the game moves so much faster too.
Yeah.
Right.
I think just the swinging, what they've done with the kind of having the sliders of like making it more or less realistic, makes it feel different. Definitely this not having the wingsuit. Like I felt, because I did actually go back to Miles because I'm working on that platinum. So it's like, and people in my chat were like, do you miss like having the wingsuit? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because I'm like, I could just glide over, And I know some people will say like, it's the Supermanification of Spider-Man, but hey, I'm here for it. I love the tunnels. I guess, we can kind of go a bunch of different directions, but really just like looking at my notes here, I think there's just like a lot of fun little details sprinkled into this game, like Kyle's point with the bike. My first note that I took in this was the Cage the Elephant song, the Cigarettes Daydreams, and I wrote Life is Strange Spider-Man edition. And I really
Yes.
like that in games when they sort of, like, I think it's so fun to have these little, like, walking simmy moments. I think on that note, this game has one of the nicest, or one of the best direct tutorializations in a video game that I've experienced, where the Sandman fight was very much a tutorial fight, but it was so interesting. And then to that extent too, same thing with the high school. It's like, I got a fun narrative beat, I got a heartfelt moment, and I got to learn the mechanics of the game. And I think it's so rare to be able to pull those off in a way where you have one sequence or one scene or one mission that is working on multiple levels so seamlessly.
Yeah, and setting the hook for making sure you care a little bit about Harry, where it's like, okay, I understand their connection, and it's always nice, when Peter is descending and kind of drinking Harry's Kool-Aid pretty quickly. It's like, oh, you just got to remember that, like, he just lost his basically mother figure with Aunt May, So it's like coming off the last game, it's like he is desperate for any connection. So this idea of like, oh my God, Harry's finally around again. Like, of course I'm going to go tour your new lab. And oh my God, you named it after Aunt May and all that stuff. Like, just on a lighter note, that environment, the fact that we're like at a level in games where we're just like taking environments like that for granted, like touring that startup for the first time, I was like, there is so much detail in this place. And the fact that it's really not around for that long before it's all destroyed, like, it's just incredible environment work.
No, it's the weird feeling that's like hard for a video game to pull off, where it's like, when you watch Titanic and you see them actually flood the real sets, and you have that feeling in the back of your head of like, oh my gosh, this costs so much. When it's like, weirdly, they can pull that off even though none of the spaces are real. Like that mission where they completely destroy the foundation. I was like, I cannot believe they're destroying this. It looks like it costs so much, even though it's like, it's all a video game and it doesn't matter.
What if you have to do another take in that environment? What are you doing, you maniacs?
Can I ask y'all a question?
Yes.
What do you think the game wanted us to feel about that foundation? Because I immediately rolled my eyes that it was like this kind of weird techno optimism of like, yeah, we can bring all the bees back with our
bee thing was an odd
bees. And I was just like, this is the stupidest, most kind of Facebook brained, idea of saving the world. And I couldn't tell if that was kind of the point, or if that was just my cynicism infecting what was supposed to be a very sincere point that the game was making.
I think it was supposed to be sincere.
No, I think you're supposed to be feeling that idea of this is all too good to be true. Something is not solid in this. I mean, I think they kind of hit on that note too by the end of having the garage start up. This is the way it should be. I feel like they're kind of commenting on it there.
I mean, that's just Facebook earlier though, but go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I disagree with you, Ben. I think, because it does feel excessive when you go in there, but the sort of financial disparity between Peter and Harry is never brought up.
Yes, why is the dad not paying off the house for them? Come on.
If we were talking about real things that symbiote Peter should have talked about, it would have been
oh my God, yes!
That would have been
I would have
financial.
loved that. That would have been so funny.
That was never a theme, because that's kind of what I felt, maybe similar to you, Jacob, and maybe you as well, Janet, of going in there and being this is excessive. This is you guys are spending way too much on what this is. This is too much. It's too much. And I thought that might be a theme, because Peter's always struggling financially, and it's mentioned in the game, but it's never mentioned against Harry.
Yeah.
It's just that his dad picks him up in a helicopter, and it's
he's no room for you, Peter. Sorry, take the bus.
It's kind of the funny plot where Peter's finally, I have a job. Where it's you can imagine okay, Harry's paying him a nice 6-figure salary to work at that foundation, but it's you don't need to work for this money. Your billionaire friend should just pay off your house.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting note about Harry in that first part of the game is it's hey, he's your best friend, but they have to establish that tone of you should care about this guy, but also just feel as a player, he's always pushing a little bit too hard. When you go to Coney Island, he's this is going to be the best night of our lives. It's I'll ride the rides, I'll have a good time, Harry, but we can relax a little bit. But I like that is kind of their gold saucer from Final Fantasy VII of just like, all right, we've built so many little mini games for you to experience, and we have a little checklist because we want you to go around and enjoy everything and use the PS5 controller to put your hands in the air as you're going down the roller coaster and all sorts of nonsense in there.
Well, did you guys also have those moments on those rides? I think it was the roller coaster in particular. I was like, oh, I can just ride this forever, huh?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was like I did have that moment as well.
I like the
wish they did a little bit more with some of the mini games, just because like they were a little. I wanted them to have like more challenge, and I get it's like that weird thing of like, well, he's Spider-Man, so like, isn't everything easy for him? Like, wouldn't he be like the greatest basketball player of all time? And I'm like,
Right.
but like, yeah, you know, where's the fun? But yeah, it was a very pretty place to be, and I loved the little hat that you could pick up.
Right.
I picked up the cowboy
fun.
hat that had a little neon glow.
Totally. I like
Yeah.
too when you're walking by the dunk tank and it's like, hey, don't you want to get in the dunk tank, Harry? And he's like, I don't want to be in the dunk tank, which is like a nice idea of like he's been imprisoned in this stupid tank for what, years now?
I you know, in terms of like plot beats that are expected in retrospect or like make sense, the hammer game where I was like, oh, what's Peter gonna do? Is he gonna like knock the thing off or not? And then having Harry be the one who just like blows the roof off of it, I thought was like a very good way of introducing like something's going on. Something's going on with him.
Kyle, what is that scene in Dragon Ball when they go to the tournament at the start of the Buu saga? Is it Vegeta who punches the punching measuring test and it explodes?
They all like flick it,
Right.
They're all trying to pretend that they're not super strong, and then Vegeta just he's Vegeta, so he just punches it as hard as he can and it blows it.
It's excellent. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of, maybe I was just in a sappy mood. I don't know what the hell is going on, but I love these types of games, superhero games, if you want to be generic with the large umbrella here, when just, it should be obvious what's going to happen, but you still build up doubt. Like, I think this sequence with like the roller coaster all falling apart, and it's like, oh my God, can Spider-Man hang on to this woman? And there's so many like great cuts of this woman really scared, like a close up of her face as she's about to fall. And it's so stupid, but in my heart of hearts, I'm like, maybe this is it. Like, maybe actually that woman is going to die, and then Spider-Man, this is what's going to descend him into madness and darkness, yada, yada, yada. It's like, oh no, of course, Harry comes and saves the day. But just having that moment of like it reminds me of like the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I loved a lot. And like, the situation they get in by the end of that game is like, I genuinely don't know how these guys can get out of this situation. Like, they still find a way.
I mean, that's the trick with that genre.
It is.
If they can make you believe that every time, then which they many do. You know,
Right.
I buy into that as well.
I mean, it's 2023. We should be used to all of these superhero tropes, and maybe I'm just a gullible idiot for really thinking I don't know how they get out of this.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
I like that like the situations that Spider-Man finds himself in are now like part of the mythos, where he's like, oh, he's holding on to a car full of people that's
Right.
like dangling, or like, oh, he has to stop a rushing train, or it's like, oh, well, I've seen him do this in a different situation, but how's he going to do it in this situation?
Right. Yeah. It's like poetry. It rhymes, you know?
And I really like, I think my favorite part of the symbiote plotline is Harry being a superhero, because it's just like weird, you know, and it's like, it feels that you know that it's going to go wrong, and you just keep wondering like, when is it going to go wrong?
Yeah.
But like seeing him do stuff, having him come up in the city when you're doing like random crimes, and then having like him be the one who swoops in and teams up with people, it's just kind of like, I don't know. You seem like you're in this for the wrong reasons, Harry. Like, I'm glad you're here, but like, I don't think that you kind of have the juice to like maintain this as a lifestyle. And then he doesn't, and you know, we see how it happens. But I like how uneasy I felt when he was kind of a hero.
Right. And doesn't
Felt
Peter
like a
Miles
rich kid with a hobby. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Batman.
don't Peter Miles even talk about the idea of like, oh, is he like a third Spider-Man at this point? It's like, there's some reference to that at some
Because
point.
he kind of like, they're like, oh, is he like us? And then he's like, I don't know. But I'll talk to you later.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess Yuri is the real third Spider-Man.
Okay, bro,
I guess
I was
so.
surprised by how much.
Hey, we're gonna save SideQuest stuff for
Oh,
later chunk.
Sure.
Okay,
Put
sorry, I
a
shouldn't
pin
have
in it.
brought
Put a pin in it.
right.
But no, like you're talking about just the budget and production, all that stuff. Like that is one of the sequences that really blew me away. Is that sequence where you're going with Harry into that factory to like rescue Tombstone? Some interaction with Tombstone. I forget exactly the details. And like when that factory is collapsing and they're escaping it together, it's like that is one of those things that like I made a note, like I got to remind myself to watch this sequence again because it is just so wildly impressive. And also I thought that was so fun just seeing Harry, fall in love with his powers and all that stuff. But there's good lines throughout the entire game, but I really like that line where Spider-Man's like, okay, Harry, there's our guy, Tombstone. What's the plan? And then Harry just goes, I think we should get him. And then Spider-Man's like, yeah, I got that part. Like, there's every once in a while, there's a really good joke in this game. Like, even I like when the enemies are like, get the little Spider-Man. And Miles is like, I hope you're not talking about me because I'm actually like half an inch taller than Peter Parker is. I don't know why you guys keep calling me little Spider-Man.
It felt a little compulsory, but I kind of think that's actually how Spider-Man quips are supposed to feel. That it's like it is really kind of like a coping mechanism for him, and so like making a joke at every second, I was like, they don't all need to be winners. I'm actually willing to give him like. Sometimes he's just gonna make a dumb joke because like that's something that Spider-Man does.
Right.
Yeah, Spider-Man's like canonically corny. Like that's just what he is. Like he's a cheesy, wholesome, pun-making character,
Yeah.
And they even and they're aware of it because like they even met like at one point Miles makes this joke and Genki's like, oh, like that's such a bad joke, and he's like, sorry, like it's my Spider-Man training. Like that's quite literally
right.
just part of what that character is. Yeah, and I think it wasn't something that like bothered me or anything, but it's like that's just how he is. It's part of the charm of Spider-Man. Like,
and
do you think Spider-Man?
Do you think it's a good joke or a bad joke when after the Black Cat mission when Miles says au
It was so
revoir,
bad.
Felicia?
That was terrible. I wrote that down.
Wait,
Hold
really?
on.
Oh, come on.
No, okay. Real quick. Wait, no, go ahead.
We got a clean take on it because I missed the punchline.
He says bye, Felicia, but in French.
He says au revoir, Felicia. Okay, so zooming back out though on that, I do think that sequence was incredible.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah,
I
one
wrote
of the best missions of the game.
Insomniac loves to show you the power of the SSD processor by jumping through rifts. I will say, I was wowed, especially the part that really blew me away was when they went to, I don't know where it's
Antarctica or whatever.
Yeah, where it's all ice. I'm like, oh, this is like so cool. And I'm not gonna lie to you, was I like, this is just ripped apart? Sure, but who cares, right?
Yes.
It's like it's still fun, and it was. I think there was so much magic in those fight sequences too, with how like Felicia would utilize, or Black Hat, right, would utilize like the sort of, and now I'm calling them rifts, but like the little teleportation holes, for, like even within combat for like some of her takedowns. I think to bring it back to or tie it into your point, Ben, about the factory area, like that area, I think especially as you get further in the game, if you were doing also a more completionist run, really like leveling up, it's such a great combination in those sections of the game where you're really powerful, you have a lot of tools, your cooldowns are like cooling down faster than ever, and you're just kind of like lost in space and time, pulling off like some of the most masterful looking combat ever. And obviously a cynic can say, well, you're just like pressing like buttons as they cool down, but I'm like, you know what, that's good enough for me. It's like this nice combo of everything. Kind of the synergy in the combat of this game is just like off the charts. And I think especially with the other characters, the duo takedowns always look so cool. So that was definitely a standout mission. But the R4 was terrible. I wrote it down.
Oh, come on, it's fun.
I was genuinely disappointed that the portals never came back in a way that I feel like the game in a way that actually makes me wonder, is like, is it way harder to pull that off than what they were letting on? Because it seems so casual in it, but I was like, I feel like if this was easy, they would have made it like a side mission where you had more things with portals. And the fact that they only show up in that like one very specific sequence, I don't know. It was just like, I was just like, please give me more portals. And the game almost always gave me more of the stuff that I liked, but then the portals were just like the one and done.
I'm sure it's a matter of, they just made Rift Apart, which is a very portal heavy game, so I'm sure that like if we sprinkled portals throughout the back half of this game, like people are gonna be like, all right, Mark Cerny over there forcing portals again and again on him because he portals into work every day or whatever the hell's going on there.
You have Mark Cerny forcing them to do something cool.
Portals are cool. But yeah, I thought that was it's interesting just seeing like how they're teasing a little bit more of just kind of the larger Marvel universe in this one, like with the portals and having like the note from Wong at the end there, and actually going to the Sanctum Sanctorum and all that stuff. But then also it's like, okay, there's Captain America's Frisbee happening and whatnot. Is this, Janet, this is just fun and games? Or do you feel like they're going to, in the next game, other than Wolverine, you think incorporate even more Marvel stuff here?
I think they've planted a lot of different seeds where they can grow in many different directions depending on what they want to do, whether it's a side game, a game that is technically part of the games but has a weird name, like Miles Morales, where it's like, this is Spider-Man 2, but it's not Spider-Man 2, but it's absolutely Spider-Man 2, but also here's Spider-Man 2.
So a side game, smaller game that has like more Marvel characters in it, like that type of thing, you're thinking?
I don't necessarily think it'd be more Marvel characters, but I feel like they might, I guess it could be more Marvel characters. I mean, I guess in a short answer, yes, but I don't know which direction they're going to go in, or if it's just like, hey, this is a fun nod, and if we want to pursue it, we've now made a through line to continue with. I do want to mention too with the Black Cat portal mission, because you mentioned like parts of this game are funny. Like, did you find the game funny? The funniest part of the game to me was right before that mission. Miles is on the phone with MJ and says, "You're worried about your boyfriend's ex. That's compassion." And MJ just hangs up on him. And I thought that was the funniest thing and the most real thing in this game. Like, I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
I feel like she said something in my game. No? Okay. Because,
she just
sometimes
hangs
you'll
up.
hang up.
Like, they talked back and
confused.
forth. And then he's like, "Oh, that's compassion." And she just hangs up.
Yeah, it is a fun dynamic there for sure. And like, I feel like them elevating Black Cat is like, okay, making Black Cat's mission one of the most interesting in the entire game. I feel like that's maybe them picking up for like, oh, maybe people were in love with the Black Cat stuff from the first game and its DLC and whatnot. And then also picking up like, all right, we're going to make MJ playable in this game again, but make sure
she's John Wick.
It's funny. I thought it was like, oh, she's just like Ellie from Last of Us Part 2 at this point, just like sneaking around like, just killing everybody in sight. Those hunters did not know what hit them at any point.
The memes have been funny of people like doing their own little skits and stuff where they're like MJ in the first game and they're like, looking around and being careful, and then the second game she just kicks down the door with a gun and starts blasting.
Well, I feel like also, is it the first mission with her? But there's one pretty early on too, where it's like, you're exploring as her, but they just make it so much more interesting because they have like a Spider-Man versus Kraven fight, I think it is, like happening around you. So it's like, look, you're still going to be going slow, and I know you're used to flying through town in the best traversal ending game ever in this game, but like the way we can make it somewhat more palatable to just be a regular human walking around is if we still put superhero fights happening around you that you can look at,
By the way, before we
someone
move on,
dangling their keys.
It kind of is. It kind of is, yeah.
Before we move on too much from Black Cat, like I don't really I feel like this is a very Ben reaction, but I don't understand her. Like, does she have superpowers?
Come on, Kyle. It's
hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Common sense.
But like,
I don't think so. I think she's just a Catwoman type lady. But
because like
boy,
in not even the
wrong.
Insomniac games, but all Spider-Man games, like people will suddenly have like comparable powers to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like they have
like,
a version of web swinging. There's another fully human character in this game who can just web swing. Like, and I'm like, does Black Cat, does she have power? And like, I don't know her outside of her appearances in video games, so I don't really understand her as a sort of character.
Gooseberry in the Twitch chat says she has my heart. That's her power.
There it is. I mean, it kind of ties a little bit.
I think it's just like she's just good at what she does, right? Like she's not like she's just strong and skilled.
Well, it's a little bit like I was confused about Kraven at a certain point. Like, all right, I get he's a big, strong guy, but like, how strong is this dude exactly? Like, okay, he is ridiculously Hulk level strong. It seems
he can
like.
just get stabbed by Scorpion and be fine and break off the thing.
Right.
Also, Kraven kind of creeps me out because everything had, this is like probably just a me thing, but there was like a weird sexual undertone to him where I was like, I don't want to be involved with this guy. When he's like, choke me out. I was like, all right, look, I don't even want to fight you anymore. I'd rather just leave. I feel like this is, again, because he has that badge, like that's his thing. He lives for the hunt.
Right,
I'm like, this is a little, I don't think I want to be involved in what you're pursuing here. You know what I mean? Like you're getting too much out of this. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't want to be involved.
He's a passionate man.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool to have that idea of him going around killing the Sinister Six secretly, just like saying like, okay, Scorpion's just dead. All right. That's a big surprise. So I liked where they went with him. I thought it was a bold move to have Venom eat his face off. That was pretty cool.
I was surprised by that death.
Yeah.
Before that, there is the scene where for 45 seconds, they really want you to think that Peter Parker is dead. Like, just freaking dead. And I was like, you couldn't even have like one mission where I thought he was dead. It's like the same cutscene, he's dead, and then because I was like, I was impressed. I was like, wow, they're really gonna have me only be Miles for the second half of this game? And I was like, no, of course not.
Come on, that's not
but like the game was operating like you would never expect that he would come back to life, and I just found it like kind of a strange editing choice.
Yeah,
I think it's also like such a challenge in a game like this, where the fact that it is a game and that it's a game that people will probably, a lot of people will platinum and want to keep playing after, or like whatever. Like it sort of reminds me of when you're watching a TV show and there's more seasons or more episodes, and the existence of the episodes is spoilers for the show.
Yep.
It's like, I guess the world doesn't end in season 2.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, episode 5 was wild. Well, there's episode 6, so like I guess Loki's gonna figure it out. It's like, okay. It kind of was like that even with this game, because like for instance, like the powers, right? Where it's like, okay, like there's not a Venomy Peter or a Black Suit Peter, but then what are they going to do with the skill points I put in this side?
Yes.
And it's like, so you just know something's, I mean, I guess you might not just know, because I will say my partner's playing through it and is like, so what happened to the skill points I used? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm like playing, I was kind of like, I'm sure they're going to do something to make it so that I can keep playing. And kind of same thing with like the Miles Peter thing. I mean, there wasn't enough time for me to think that he could be dead, so it was kind of the same thing that Jacob mentioned. But even so, it's like, well, you structured this game in this way, so you're gonna have to, like, unless you're gonna play, you know what I mean?
It's a weird thing to have like systems level spoilers. Like, I think God of War Ragnarok also is early on. Like, I think in the menu somewhere it listed an option as companions instead of Atreus. So I'm like, okay, well, that's spoiling where it's going. And it's kind of a similar thing where playing this, it's like, okay, we're getting all these powers for this suit, and then it's just going away. Like, that has to come back in some way. They wouldn't just let me throw it away. And so I wasn't familiar with the concept of the anti-venom suit. And so when it popped up, it's like,
they're going to do something.
Yeah. And it's like, it was shocking just how the overall story up until that point was like, maybe I've been listening to too much of Something Rotten and them talking about Last of Us Part 2, but definitely throughout the entire game.
Like they're not here, Ben.
What do you mean?
The esteemed podcast.
Where can I find this podcast, Ben?
Podcast apps near you. But no, just thinking about Last of Us Part 2, and Blake talked a lot about kind of the alcohol symmetry, the relapse stuff towards the end of Last of Us Part 2 with Ellie's rage, all that stuff. And so I was thinking about that a lot going through this game as well, just that everybody, when they have the symbiote, it's like, I can control it. I'm still me as they're spinning out of control. So descending darker and darker and darker, and then redemption. But then it's like, yeah, but now there's like a white version of the symbiote suit. And Peter's like, sign me up, great, no questions asked. I was like, don't you think there's still like a chance that this thing might have a similar effect?
He's like, I understand color theory, this one's good.
Right.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, bold move. But, I guess they got to do something. But it also made me laugh too. And they had to do it. It's a tough thing, but like, it's just such a weird thing structurally in the game where it's like, this suit, I can't get this suit off. It's controlling everything. But then like at a certain point, it's like, yeah, you can go ahead and swap to any Spider-Man suit you want to during gameplay. Like, I guess just the lore-wise.
Really, I was like, I'm not swapping suits.
Yeah,
like,
same
when
here.
The story is he can't take it off. I'm not taking it off. I think the funnier thing with the anti-venom suit is that like in Venom Rage mode, they give you all these like obviously very violent takedowns that like I think you're supposed to understand, like Peter would not do this normally. Like he's kind of like brutalizing the enemies in ways that he doesn't usually. And then the anti-venom suit has all of those still, like where you're still just like body blowing, like breaking a guy's ribs and throwing him. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess he still does do that with a new good suit.
Yeah, I think they're kind of stuck. They had to do it. It's like we can all understand that it's a video game. We got to move on.
In the same way that Peter like retires at the end of the game, but then he's back post credits and you can play as both of them.
Right. You do what you gotta do. I really loved, we talked about it a little bit on the MinnMax show as well, just like how surreal and strange this game was throughout the entire thing. Like it just, I mean, on the lightest note, the amount of like flashbacks were surprising, just for like constant variety of flashing back to, taking the first picture as Peter Parker of Spider-Man, all that type of stuff. But then just constant variety as well of having just those weird sequences where like, okay, this is just a weird one-off where Miles gets infected by the Scorpion's venom, and then he has this surreal like underwater dream thing, or like having the Mr. Negative stuff back, having the Mysterio stuff in there, the fact that we're like playing through Peter Parker's mind, you go into like Venom's mind, like there's just a lot of good, trippy, weird stuff. And it seems like that's a big note they got from the first game, is like people really like that Scorpion sequence, and kind of just expanding on that in a big way throughout all this has been awesome.
Yeah, I think those were some of the best, like, I mean, I'm kind of just a sucker for that stuff in games, admittedly, and in like kind of all media. Like, I like the weird, surrealist, trippy, like, and I think those make for more entertaining and authentic emotional explorations as well. Like, I don't really buy into like Peter being like, "You're a lot to work with," but I do buy into Miles pretty directly dealing with his own issues in relation to how he played a role in the death of his own loved ones, and feeling like, I like the idea. I think that feels a lot more authentic, where it ends up being, you still have the people talking smack to you, but you know it's not literally his mom. It's what he worries his mom might actually think. Not like, she's evil version, and now she's like, you never clean up your room. You know, it's like, okay, like, who cares? You know, but this is like him projecting his own insecurities, and you get that through the lens of the people that he does know back at him. So I like those sections a lot too, for being a more authentic version of people's insecurities being reflected back at them.
Yeah. I thought Miles in general, I just liked his plot line more. I thought that his kind of his emotional beats, you know, him dealing with Lee was pretty cool. There's that very strange beat where they go into Peter's mind.
Yeah.
Right. And you find out that like one of Peter's biggest anxieties is like all of the people that he put in prison are going to break out of prison, and he's going to have to like put them back there. And I was kind of, you know, in my leftist political brain, I was just like, so Peter just wants like longer sentences with higher security prisons? Like, that's what his biggest anxiety is.
Is it too much to ask that the raft just keeps things locked down just for once, please? I mean, I guess Doc Ock is still in there. They're doing okay.
Peter's like, what are my tax dollars going to? Not to keep these criminals behind bars.
I did think it was interesting seeing how Insomniac pivoted, because they got so much crap for the Spider Cop stuff in the last game.
Yeah,
then in this
Spider
one,
Cop, not in this game.
No, like a certain character at a certain point makes a reference where I think Peter asks, like, "Oh, do you have any tattoos?" And the character, which we'll keep secret till later, they go, "Oh, I just one of Spider Cop's gravestone." It's like, ah, ha, ha. And then there's also a mission at a certain point where Peter says, like, he's like, "Oh, great, now the police are involved." It's like the worst case scenario is now the police are involved, instead of him just being like, "Hey, coppers." But now he's buddies with the firemen, and they're all cool and hot, and so it's all good.
Cool and hot.
I think one of the weakest parts of the story for me was like the bell stuff. I want somebody to make a super cut of every time a bell is ringing in this game, because it's like, it's just so much of the struggle of the game is like, what are we going to do? How can we get this suit off? It's like, you guys have shown it like 30 times. Just hold your friend down and ring a ding ding a stupid bell in their head, and every problem will be solved. Like, it feels like a bigger, lamer cop out than like Kryptonite. This idea of like, there are bells everywhere in this game, and they're still like, well, I guess we can capture part of the sound on our phone to make a better gun for MJ. But other than that,
maybe if they had like planted a seed of Miles being into like, I don't know, like sound technology or something.
Right.
I like, that would have been a cool way he could make a device, but you know, I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, it did make me laugh. Like at a certain point when they're like, Peter's talking about Miles capturing the sound of the bell. It's like, oh, we need more mids, yada, yada, yada. But at a certain point, Peter's like, oh my God, using your phone to capture the bell sounds. That's genius, Miles. I'm like, you guys just like 3D built a little robot spider bot. Like, and this is a genius to record a bell on your phone?
Yeah. I was, a quick aside on the music tech thing. It's very much the dad in me, I'm sure. But every time Miles is like, I'm going to go to school for music tech. I'm like, you're a genius. Please do something practical. You can do music tech on the side. You can double major. I don't care, but please,
I mean, Peter's
engineering
a
or something.
That's right. Yeah, he's expressing his art.
What else was his big plan? Be a public school teacher? I mean, I guess I guess I don't know if Brooklyn Visions, is that a public school? It's a gifted school.
It's unclear, yeah. But I did think that was a really smart
My only
start.
knowledge of it, I'm sure the same for all of us, is from the Spider-Verse movies. You know, that's probably where they spend the most time with Vision.
It is funny that Peter picked maybe literally the worst job that a Spider-Man could have. It's like a job where the most important thing is you're there at the same time every day and you like don't leave.
Right, he should be a freelance podcaster. That's the loose.
The only realistic part of, well, not the only realistic part of the game, because there actually is a good amount of things that, like, yeah, that seems correct, is like that he got fired immediately. Because,
right,
yeah,
I did love that. I did love that.
Not only that, honestly, they could press charges on you. It is quite literally illegal to leave your students unattended. Quite literally illegal. So the fact that he's not in jail with the criminals that he put there, he count himself lucky.
My biggest fear is that all the truant teachers are going to get out of jail.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, guys, I have a really dumb question. Jacob, and it's not about Spider-Man, so forgive me. Where are laws? Like, is there some place I can just like...
Where are laws?
Yeah, can I just like go to a courthouse and say, could I see these laws? Like, the answer is like, I guess you can probably Google Minnesota state laws where we live and stuff, but like...
What are you trying to do here?
I'm just asking, like, where are laws posted for us to know what's legal and not legal in society in real life?
That's not a terrible question.
Thank you.
It would be nice to just have a list, right? Because there's some that we know, right? Don't kill people.
Don't covet thy neighbor's ox.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, what's Ben looking to get away with? Where he's like, let me just double check this binder.
There's one master list, and if you hold it, you can cross things out, and then it's not a law anymore.
Oh, it's like the contract in Little Mermaid. I see how it works. So just to be clear, everyone's smarmy, but no one has an answer for me for where are laws?
No, I'm agreeing with you, actually.
Okay.
I would love just a straightforward, here is the list of all Minnesota laws.
And if it's like...
I imagine you can just look it up, right?
Yeah,
like,
but okay.
It'll be like
all government buildings.
So, yeah, 1977, are you just like going to City Hall and saying, show me the laws?
I imagine there's like a
go.
database available that you can just access, maybe
I
varying
googled
databases
Minnesota
per state.
laws, and I found 2022 Minnesota statutes. So that's something, I guess. There's a lot of PDFs on this page, it looks like.
No, I guess it's fine. Oh, you know what? We need Haley on this. She would know.
Haley, where are laws?
Okay, well, save that for the next community question on the podcast.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Anyways, I like the angle of having Peter as a teacher and like him being Miles' teacher in the beginning. It's like, oh, that's a really smart setup. I think, and immediately they're talking about like what resistance friction on water or something. So they're kind of setting up that idea that you don't just drown anymore and whatnot. But I thought that was a really smart idea. And like that entire first third of the game, I feel like I felt that pressure more than any other superhero fiction that I can think of just like, God, this is such a hassle, but we're pushing so hard to be good and do the right thing, but it's just so hard when it's interfering with our personal lives in the worst ways. But by God, we're trying to be as positive as possible and blasting through it. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I really, that's my favorite thing of Spider-Man is like, it sucks,
Yes.
That it's like he's like, you can't not do this because people will die, but it's like, as fun and cool as it is in the moment, it's really not fun to have this. With great power comes great responsibility, all that. And so then when there were side missions that were like, can you help me ask this girl out to prom, or ask this boy out to prom specifically, and it was just like, Miles, you're spending like 40 minutes on this. Like, this is one that's okay to skip. You can take a nap.
He just wants to be a good boy.
Kind of adding to what Kyle brought up earlier with the memes, I have loved the lighthearted internet jokes and discourse about this game, because that definitely was one of them I saw on TikTok of someone being like, what? Me asking, I mean, they didn't use that mission specifically, but let me just do that for simplicity. Like, what, me asking someone to prom is an emergency? You're here, aren't you? You have the time. Well, I guess we'll swing back to that mission.
Yeah.
Sidequest.
I know where you're going. Yep.
So, yes, exactly. It's like, okay.
Let's see, other little bits and bops I love in this game. It's so dopey, but I love in that lizard fight when he bursts through like the fossil of the T-Rex and they do the full Jurassic Park homage with like the banner falling down in the museum, obviously. But then I like to, as the T-Rex skull is falling, like Peter like shoots a web and saves it real quick. That's a real win for nerds everywhere, I think. Let's see, other odds and ends we haven't hit yet? Moments that stand out to you guys?
Well, I mean, there's the end of the game.
Oh yeah, that whole thing.
Where Harry dies.
He's not dead though. He's like in a weird coma.
He's like in a coma, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like potentially he's going. Well, yeah. So there's the whole Norman plot line where it seems like Norman's going to make him into something much worse now. Like, you know, it always seemed like it was like, well, if this doesn't work, we've got that other thing. Don't worry, it's even worse than the symbiote.
Right, the G serum, yeah, where it's like, I don't think I want Harry to come back as Hobgoblin or whatever. Like, I think if they just fully embrace the idea of Doc Ock presumably teaming up with now Norman Osborn as Green Goblin, that seems like a cool hook for the big finale of this trilogy.
That's kind of what the tease that I thought we were getting at is like Harry's out again.
Yeah.
And it's going to be Green Goblin, which is like, it's funny because like I feel like he was in the original Spider-Man movie. Again, I'm coming at it from a perspective of not really reading the comics, where like I haven't actually spent a lot of time with Green Goblin. You know what I mean?
I'm a Norman now.
Yeah, but I like Norman's performance here. I think it's cool for them to take, 2.5 games to build up to getting to Green Goblin. I think that's a fun idea. Brian Intihar in Spoilercast, he has teased that idea of the way he phrases it, which is very cute, is he says like, okay, if this game is our Civil War in the MCU, like we want the third entry in the series to be our Infinity War or our Endgame. So it's like, okay, what is that? I hope that doesn't mean just packing.
Why can't I just say the middle part of a trilogy? We need to frame it in this thing where there are actually 17 movies in between.
I think he's just coming at the idea of like it's going to be huge and probably cross more streams. So like presumably Wolverine would be in the third game then, which I was surprised that there's not even like a post credits Wolverine
third game.
thing.
That's the fourth game.
Right? Yeah, it is a little bit
That's why
confusing.
like I hate that. I really hate what Spider-Man Miles Morales is like, how it sits in the sequence. It's so odd.
It is confusing, yeah. Like, especially because in Kind of Funny spoiler cast, Brian Intihar says, like, I consider Miles Morales to be Spider-Man 2. It's like, okay, well, now it's just confusing.
Well, then why
for
didn't
everybody.
That's the thing. I don't understand.
It's a mess. But yeah, so the big post-credits scene here is then it's like, all right, well, I guess Peter is just doing a little startup company. Obviously, the big thing is MJ finally starts a podcast called The New Normal. Which
I screamed. I was like, this is what you're doing. You named it that.
Yeah, she's finally fulfilling every fantasy she's had, and she's kind of taking her life into her own hands, starting up her own thing. And I immediately went
the most boring podcast known to man.
I then looked around, and there are like so many other podcasts that are already called New Normal in real life. I was just curious, like, do they have to clear this by legal? How does that work?
Well, the nice thing about that universe is podcasts only need to last about 45 seconds, and they're just sent to you, and they just start playing. So, you just have an audience automatically.
Right. And then the big thing at the end is you get to see who Miles's mom is dating, where it's like some guy named Albert. I'm like, okay, should I know this guy? And then he says, hey, this is my daughter, Cindy. And forgive me for being a fake ass Spider-Man fan, but I immediately had to Google like, who is Cindy?
Oh, 3,000%. I've been waiting to be able to joke about Googling about that, because again,
I'm surprised they didn't build that into the game somehow. It's like this Google comes up and like, okay, this is who Cindy is. My daughter was watching me play the end. She got really excited because she thought it might be Penny from Spider-Verse.
Oh, okay.
And we were both kind of disappointed. I was like, oh, it's some character I don't know.
It's Silk, but then the fun thing is like, I guess
it is the most here are two random people. They don't even show like, oh, she like tucks her shirt up and you can see like a costume under it or whatever. It's just like, here's two guys. Yeah.
Well, I do, for what it's worth, like I do hope, I don't know anything about this character. I would like to see a what's the word? An origin story. Yeah, she doesn't need to already be a spider woman
Silk
or whatever.
Silk spider.
Yeah, like I don't know who that is. Feel free to teach me. I don't mind at all.
So do you think if you had to gamble right now, Kyle, at the risk of eating your own butt, which is the standard gamble
which
for
we
you?
learned I did not have to.
You don't have to do it. Yeah, you lucked out. It turns out we made that bet that if Zelda was delayed out of May, you had to eat your own butt on camera.
Right.
But do you think that you will not be able to play as Peter Parker Spider-Man in the next game? Because is it going to be Miles and Silk?
I think so, because, and I'm going off of, they have said explicitly that Miles is the main Spider-Man now. Peter, I think, would be in the game, and you would interact with him a lot, but I imagine you probably won't play as him at this point.
Yeah,
which is totally fine with me. I think he ended at a nice spot. If the Spider-Man 3 or 4, 4 in parentheses, according to the game's creative director, was just Miles, like, if he's not playable, I'm certainly not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I think he'll probably come in at a big heroic moment towards the end. He'll come through the portals for the end game moment, I guess, and save the day in some way, right? But it is going to be interesting to have another game built up, and like, I wonder if they do another kind of like Miles Morales type expansion to kind of explain Silk's origin. That might be kind of cool.
That would be good, and I'd like them to do that, even though it is annoying that they have this weird like, no, it's part of the thing, but then it's not part of the thing. Whatever. I guess it's just how they want to do it. So they'll just call it Spider-Man Silk.
We need to start talking about the side stuff, because like a lot of the kind of sequel or side game teases are like there, which is like in a really explicit way, which surprised me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, game on. Stop here if you haven't finished all of the side quest content in Spider-Man 2. Timestamp starting right now. All right, what do you want to talk about first? What do you think is the biggest side quest here?
Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse is in this game.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but I listened to a spoiler cast where they brought it up and I was like, oh my God. Like, I've just seen the tease of like the Spider-Bot stuff and wondering where they're going to, but that's huge.
Right. Is that what that... Okay, so you get all the Spider-Bots and you open a portal to a character that I didn't recognize who almost looks like Blocky, like kind of PlayStation 1-esque.
I guess it was like a scrapped character from Spider-Verse.
It honestly, it looks like El Paso elsewhere. Like, that is what the art style looks like in this really interesting way.
Like, well, with Game Informer, Marcus Stewart and I are currently playing the original Spider-Man, not the original, the Neversoft Spider-Man 1 from 2000, which is fun to see those back to back. And my first instinct was like, oh, this must be a character from that game, because it's like they're going for like a throwback look. But so it is. I was confused about that, but the idea is that is a direct tie to Spider-Verse.
Yes.
Which, according to Across the Spider-Verse, this Peter is already embedded in that culture. He's there. Like, White Spider-Man is in the club.
Right. So timeline-wise, if you really want to get dorky about this, I mean, it's all just fun. Yeah. Right. It's just
I mean, honestly, I'm not going to hold it against the game and be like, wait a second, he retired.
Right. Janet, I assume you wanted to talk about the... By the way, we should know, that's super cool. I love having that Spider-Verse direct connection. That's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
But I assume you want to talk about the Haley stuff? Is that where you were going earlier?
No.
Oh, which direction were you going in?
Well, we mentioned the stuff with Yuri, who is what's her hero name again?
Wraith,
yeah.
Wraith?
Well, I was surprised by how. Also, I really hope they do some Spider-Verse stuff for like either DLC or a side game or something, because I just think it would be very fun. But that was probably my favorite.
That's unfortunately their living game. That's their Suicide Squad is going to be Spider-Verse, and they'll say you never have to stop playing.
I mean, frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if. I would be more surprised if we never get a live service iteration of Spider-Man, or a Spider-Man that includes live service elements, given PlayStation's approach to like how they want to go about their live service. But anyway, that's kind of more of a bigger podcasty thing than here. But for the for Wraith, I was surprised by how much the DLC were relevant to this game. I was like, oh, I maybe should have played those, I guess. But like, I had to look up. I'm like, when did Yuri become Wraith? Like, I had to Google that. I had no idea what was going on. I mean, it's not that hard to latch onto, so it's fine. But same with Black Cat too. I'm like, oh, so they did actually date. I wasn't sure if they dated or if he just thought she was hot, Yeah, but that stuff was cool. It was really fun too, like seeing Wraith then out in the wild as well. So I really like their commitment to incorporating like their version of what Spider-Man's New York is, and having that through line across the games and across all of the NPCs, really in a lot of the side quests, where you'll see people that you've seen before and interact with them, and it really is like this cozy community feel within this large city.
Yep, I'm totally with you. It's fun to see these characters come back and again. It's like, oh, this truly feels like a little pocket universe for Marvel now that Insomniac is built up, and it's fun to have these characters come back again and again.
In that plot line, in Yuri's plot line, Carnage is there. So another just like, here's a thing, not in this game, Carnage.
We'll get back to it.
A lot of people are saying that they expect there to be Carnage DLC.
I hope it comes. I hope they can send me a disc and it's bright red. That's what I want.
The backside is red somehow.
Yeah.
That'd be cool as hell. Actually, I'd be really into that.
I was surprised at the mission where you play as Haley. I thought that was a really wild idea. Like, all right, I thought I was just doing an average little mission, then actually play as a new character. I was surprised that Miles and Haley hadn't gone on a date yet as well. I forget if it's in this mission or the main story when they reveal that, or it's like, what? I just assumed that they were like a hot couple at this point, but I guess they're just now descending into a real relationship.
Also, I didn't, and maybe I'm just misremembering, but was that established at all in Miles Morales, like the game? Because
they were lovey-dovey.
Like really?
They were flirty.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I kind of felt like his thing was more like semi with his friend, which I know that is his friend, but he was also kind of like, oh, it's a date. It's not a date. Oh, I'm weird. And I'm like, that's kind of, I don't have that happen with my friends. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of felt like a little thing there. So I kind of was a little taken aback by that. And I wanted more, I think, from that relationship a little bit. It would have been cool to see.
For sure.
Just something more evolved, because it felt very like, they didn't have a lot of time together on screen, but I did write in my notes, Miles with the end of the world Riz, LMAO. So that eventually I did pay off, I guess.
I know some of those words.
Did you like Miles's suit by the end, where he just like fully reveals his hair, which feels like, hey man, you gotta try and keep the secret somehow. You can't just show your hair.
The hair on the top was weird. I don't mind the color scheme though, even though it does look like those, those character popsicles you can get at the ice cream truck. The color scheme is very much that, but like I don't mind. The hair at the top is weird though, which he has two suits where his hair is sticking out. At the top, right? Because the Mysterio suit he gets is also.
Is that? Does his hair stick out? I do love that Mysterio suit. Mysterio, when that mission popped up for the first time in this game, and it was like, hey, go encounter Mysterio at Coney Island. I was like, oh my God, this is all I want. I am so excited to see Mysterio in this game. And then just to have the whole side quest of him doing his, I guess going inside your mind mission, but now it's in VR where Miles just gets to play a rhythm game and then do like hi-fi rush style combat. It's such a wild thing.
That rhythm game thing, genuinely embarrassing for a game
really?
that I think is operating on such a high level for so long.
What do you want?
It's like hitting the inputs felt bad. Like the game feel was bad. Please. It didn't feel like they were doing it. The beat was trash. I apologize. And then when you drop the bass and the crowd does not do anything,
sure.
It's just like it went on for so long. Right. I couldn't believe how silly that was. I do want to say, just going back to Haley for a second. I don't know this for sure, but I do think that they do a lot of kind of like work with, talking to people with different, levels of disability or whatever in this game. The idea of Haley not having a spoken internal dialogue like every other character in the game does, because presumably she's been deaf from birth and just like would not think in that way, I'm sure is something that like deaf people have written about before or whatever, but I just found it so cool because it's like in every Sony game, every character is talking to themselves constantly, and to have her thoughts like expressed in a different way through these kind of like emojis floating in the world or whatever, I just thought was really clever, and I wouldn't have noticed if they gave her an internal monologue as well, but I thought it was very cool that they didn't.
That's interesting, yeah.
It connects nicely with, and this is where I think they have an aspect. As far as their writing, there is a nice aspect of good through lines and commitment to those through lines, like that you see reflected in this game. Like to me, I thought back to one of the when she guested on the podcast and talked about like her art process, which that might have been after this scene. I don't remember when exactly that scene happens, but she mentions that was her way to communicate when she was a child, like drawing and having pictures, because she wasn't able to like connect in other ways, and that's kind of what inspired her to go into art. So I felt like it was cool to have that also reflected in that mechanic as well, and sort of have those two in conversation with each other.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting angle too, of having the text to speech, so you could talk to Haley as you're swinging around as Miles. Like, oh, okay, they really thought through this stuff. I think it's a cool idea.
There's also a cute cat scene in that side quest that I messed up because I didn't hit the little spider doll, so the cat didn't get to hold it at the end.
Oh,
yeah.
I love.
And I shouldn't have even played it. I just delete. I'm just gonna delete it off my console.
Uninstall.
Yeah, just uninstall.
I love the combination of the Mysterio stuff where you fight in the snow globe version of New York City. Yeah. It's freaking awesome. And then honestly, getting that suit at the end.
The Mysterio stuff is up there with my favorite thing in this game. I think it was like, to me, the perfect combination of fun narrative and just good combat. Like, again, this is not a game that is, I think, meant to be challenging, and obviously there are like plenty of settings to like adjust the difficulty to be exactly kind of how you want it to be. But I like having the option to play with the combat in different ways, because it is a game that I think one of the big critiques of the combat is you can kind of be asleep at the wheel for it because it is a bit button mashy. And I think the challenges invite a recontextualization of those mechanics, but I think these challenges specifically also were more approachable than, as someone trying to platinum Miles Morales, like some of the challenges that you have to do that like Peter set up are like stealth missions from hell, where it's like literally you breathe on the controller and they're like, you got to start it over, and there's like 30 of these guys, and like I'm like, oh god. But like I think this was just such a cool use. Like the environment would always shift. They were genuinely like kind of challenging, and also you didn't need to hit top level for all of them to get the platinum either. So I thought I just really liked their approach to it, and that's honestly like the thing that I was most excited to be able to talk about once people finally make their way through the game, because I think to me it was like some of the best stuff. And my number one highlight is also from Sidequest stuff. It's was it Herald with the pigeons?
Yeah. Yep. That was awesome.
Flying with
best
the pigeons.
mission in the
number
game.
one moment in the game.
And
when you fly with the pigeons.
it feels almost, I feel like the secret that developers have realized over the last 10 years or so is like, look, you put some music in a mission in a memorable way, it's really going to lock into people's brains. But like having that song play as you're flying around with the pigeons, like, oh my God, it worked out so well. And then he was gone by the time it came back, even though my game was buggy and the paramedics were like glitching through the ambulance. And it was
I
kind
saw
of
that happen to someone else too, which I thought really took away.
It wasn't great. It wasn't great.
Of the scene, but
I love that like that mission being after the credits is so cool, right? Like, does it have to be, can you play it beforehand?
I assume you can.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Yeah, because it's just kind of like, you know, this is like the nice way to be Spider-Man after all the like crazy, you know, it's like there's not a supervillain terrorizing the city, but you don't have to only beat up guys in your like mission to be Spider-Man. Like you can do this really kind of nice, tender thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I'm laughing, Jacob, because I did a lot of my side mission mop up when the Venom sort of nests first appeared.
oh my gosh, that's
So
so
like
chaotic.
it was kind of a frantic time in the city, and I was like trying to like, you know, level up and stuff. And I was like, oh, let me do all these side missions, and it's like, I mean, it still hit. It was still good. I still really enjoyed that mission, but it's funny. It does seem like the better way to do it would have been after the game credits roll.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand, the Herald mission with that Grandpa mission, where the Grandpa, where he just talks about how scary it is to be fading out, as he put it, and he has that nice line where he blinked and his wife was gone. It's like like this game does just small human moments surprisingly well, and that was one of just like sitting on a bench with this grandpa talking about his life. It's like, oh God, it reminded me of, you know, like the Red Dead scene with the nun, you know, but just to have a nice moment to reflect on mortality in the middle of this chaotic story, it hits a lot harder than I think some of the big bombast or having a character like Scream come in there, for me at least, right? You know, it's like I'm going to remember that scene a lot more than that.
You just can't put too much New York in a Spider-Man game.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like most of the best moments for me are like very New York moments. I did want to talk about the Miles Instruments mission, which I thought was like the mission itself. I thought was a little silly, where it's just like, here's a drum that like these guys hid or whatever. But the end museum I thought was really cool. I liked being able to just go around and read those all the plaques. And there was also unintentionally like the funniest moment of the game for me, where I had been reading about like Charlie Parker, and I've been reading about like all these things, and then I just clicked on one and I read it, and it was like blah 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 artist also like helped stop the Nazis from their like infectious disease that would have wiped out humanity. I was like, what? And then I remembered like, oh, this is a superhero game, like this is Marvel lore now. But it was very funny that it was like in the middle of all the like real life history about like musicians and artists. There's just a superhero.
That's funny.
Yeah. Have we missed anything? Chat, let us know if we missed anything. Other favorite parts that we haven't hit, y'all?
I did want to... Yuri's abilities and how she can just, like I said, she has powers comparable to Spider-Man now and can web swing with her like chain hook thing. I'm like,
Yeah, it's a grappling.
what's going on here, man?
She's just really agile.
I guess, yeah. Once you retire from the police force, you just become just short of Spider-Man, apparently. I guess.
The Venom suit ability where you can pick people up and slam them into the ground, and then the upgrade to that is the best phrasing, where it just says, like, limit erased on how many people you can pick up. And in those later missions where there are like 40 symbiote things and you're just picking them all up and slamming them into the ground. It's awesome.
It's awesome. Hell of a game. Yeah, I'm really blown away by everything they put together here. Definitely
might make the 210s. We'll see.
Oh, good lord. Yeah,
I think so.
Wait, Janet, that's debatable for you?
No, I was just saying, that's just genuinely how I answered it. Like, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
223 for me.
I think, like, yeah, this is. I'd be surprised if it's not in the upper 10s for MinnMax's
I think what's
top 20
interesting,
games
though, I will say about this year, because there's so many titles, is that, like, I'll start to have that conversation with myself of, like, what my top 10 is and then, like, what my top 5 is. And there's so many games where I'm like, I think this could be top 5. But then when you keep listing those, it's like, well, you can only have 5 in the top 5.
That's
the math starts mathing
that's
against
the kicker.
You. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's a fantastic game. Yeah, and I think, too, like, for a completionist run, it's, like, intensely approachable. And I feel like, quite genuinely, there really is, outside of what Kyle's mentioning with missing, like, I don't know, 3 extra stealth takedowns where it's like, it's not worth it, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Outside of that part, like, just from a story perspective, like, it's such a game that's, even if you don't want to platinum it, you should complete it, because I think you do actually get something worthwhile narratively or, like, fun to be had. And it's not just do this thing so that the number goes up and it's like 15 out of 15 kind of situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, hey, that's it from X Spoilers on Spider-Man 2. If you like thorough conversations about games, boy, do we have the place for you. It's called The Deepest Dive. We let the community vote, and sorry to rub it in, but we let the community vote for what we tackle for The Deepest Dive, and they chose Alan Wake 2 over Spider-Man 2. So you can check out that discussion on MinnMax's YouTube channel or in the bonus podcast feed if you want to help support these types of discussions directly at patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Jacob, Kyle, Janet, thank you so much on behalf of Spider-Man and all his friends, and thank you so much for watching or listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Did you know that you can more than double the amount of podcasts from MinnMax every single week by supporting us at the $5 tier on Patreon? You don't have to listen through the browser or anything dumb like that. You'll get access to a private RSS feed if you support us on Patreon. You put it in your favorite podcast app, and then bam, you can listen to our weekly bonus podcast Party Chat, the podcast versions of The Deepest Dives, MinnMax interviews, Max spoilers, and you get the MinnMax Show podcast a day earlier than everybody else. So please help support independent games media. Head over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's.